Hey everybody, in this episode of the Veep After Show, we're breaking down Season 6, Episode 10, Groundbreaking. Let's see what happens when we try to stage a pee-in. Let's do it.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Look at that. One last time this season, we're hearing the Veep theme song play us into the Veep After Show. Of course, we've been breaking down every episode of Veep that's airing this season. And of course, tonight is the season finale. I'm your host, Frank Moran, and I'll be joining you solo as we break down this last episode for the season, Season 6, Episode 10, Groundbreaking. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HappyGoJackie. And as always, folks, you can like us on Facebook, give us those 5 stars on iTunes, subscribe to the YouTube channel, give us our thumbs up while you're there, and feel free to hop in the chat to discuss this episode in particular or the series in general. So, of course, it's the final finale of the season. A lot of storylines kind of culminating here. And what was really cool about this episode is that the way they kind of fractured time here, that we got to see a lot of different snippets of Selena's life throughout this whole episode, and very much in a non-linear fashion. So it was very cool to see things that have only been kind of alluded to kind of see the full context for them. And as we start the episode off here, though, we see them at Selena basically conceding the presidency at the which happened at the end of last season. We get to see her actually talking. And what I do like about that, though, is that, of course, as Selena goes, just to make this terrible moment in her life even worse, of course, the balloons cue, so they drop, the song starts playing. Seems very much like a celebratory moment when it is one of the worst moments in Selena's life. Then we also check out Jonah's house, and of course we saw he's basically has been kind of run out of office. He's not going to be running again. Sherman Tanz has kind of distanced himself. Jonah's uncle said he's going to have his cousin run instead because he feels like Jonah is so incompetent. So he's basically back at home in his mom's house, and Richard comes to visit, though. So they get a chance to play some video games, and Jonah very much reverts back to form there. So when he has another woman to be kind of looking out for him, and so it's like, hey, can Richard spend the night? Yeah, I'll make you waffles. No, I don't want waffles. So it's nice to kind of see Jonah and Richard kind of reestablish that relationship. It was definitely a pairing that we didn't get to see a lot of this season, but it was always kind of fun when they did get a chance to interact. We also see another big moment for Selena, too, is that it's her 6-month anniversary with Jafar, and he gives her a bracelet that belonged to another member of his family, passes it on to Selena. And this, I feel like it's excellent to see Selena in a relationship that seems to be a genuinely very healthy one. They both are very attracted to each other. They both respect what each other bring to the table. And after Selena's, her various run-ins and her problems with Andrew throughout the years, it's cool to see her in a relationship that's working. Sad to say, though, that that is not always going to be the case, though, for Selena, as we find out towards the end of the episode. Then we get our first real big major time jump there. We jump back to 2 months after losing the election, and we see her over at the wellness clinic in Arizona. And we get to see Catherine and Marjorie visiting her, and Gary's been there the entire time. And Selena is in kind of rough shape. And Selena, because of the medication, not sure of everything, actually says that she loves Catherine, which, of course, means that something must be wrong with Selena, because that's not something that she would normally say. And I do like, though, as Catherine says, are we sure that she's on the medication, the dosage is correct? And Gary mentions, well, people think that we're married, so I feel like the dosage is just fine. So Catherine and Marjorie do say, though, that after she gets out, they'd like her to live with them. And so we also do get to see Andrew visit as well while Selena's there. And we get to see that sweet sweet kissing scene between Selena and Andrew. And Selena's tongue in that moment where she just kind of sticks it out and tries to, give Andrew a little tongue is just great work by Julia Louis-Dreyfus on that. Now, we see, though, that basically Selena realizes, though, as she first got questioned as she was leaving on that date with Jafar, the press is just very curious because, especially after what came out about the revelations about Tibet, Selena's stock has never been higher, and President Montez, her stock is basically plummeting. She's down in the polls. People are loving loving Selena right now, so they're really loving her. But Leon from the Washington Post is still kind of really after Selena to kind of find out what the deal is about this her time in the spa. And Selena's like, man, Leon is just, he will not stop asking about this. We got to get him off the track about this. While they're trying to figure that out, Amy does bring in the model for the library. And as as everybody comments, it does very much look like a vagina. If you looked at it from above, there has a kind of that shape there. So Selena's fine with that, but the one part that she does get freaked out about is that when Amy points out the crypt. And Selena does not realize, though, that many of the former presidents, as Amy says, many of the formers are buried at their libraries. And Selena does not really seem to be thrilled at all about the idea of, like, wait, this is where I'm going to be my final resting place right here. Not really keen on that. And I do like that she. We find out though that there's a problem though that the site of the library where it's going to be built is basically built on an area that was where housing for the former Yale slaves where it was located, and so the idea of it building on this kind of ground seems very distasteful. And Selena's not really loving that idea. She's like, man, I do not want my vagibrary, as she's referring it to be basically ruined by this. And of course, Selena wants to swear everybody to secrecy in the room, though. But the one person that did hear about it that doesn't get a chance to hear that big swearing to secrecy is Marjorie. And when Selena and Gary realize that, they race upstairs, and Marjorie's already told Catherine all the details. Catherine is dead set against this, especially because she says, my baby, is going to be half African American, so she's very offended that this would be happening. And Catherine and Marjorie's nursery for this baby is bonkers. Selena's like, what is this room? What is this? They've got dream catchers. They have this weird chair that Selena's sitting on that she doesn't understand, what she's sitting on at all. And she also, more offended by anything though, is she does not like to be referred to as grandmother. She hates the word. Like, look at my neck, look at my hands. Do not call me a grandmother. That creeps me out. We get another time jump, though, back to 6 years ago for Selena's first day in the office as vice president. And her and Gary are going into the Oval Office to meet the president. And just before they can enter, Ben walks out and basically says, hey, you know what? Let me show you over to the office in the EEOB building, which is the building across the street from the White House. And Selena's like, wait a minute, this stinks. Hughes, said that I'd, be able to play an active role in this. I thought I was going to be in this building. And basically, Ben says, you know what, you don't have to do anything but be a woman. So, of course, Selena, disappointed by this, but trying to spin it to Mike and Amy that this is a positive. Hughes is going to be doing something kind of weird. So, we have some distance, which is great in the EEOB building. So we get to see Selena, as always, trying to constantly spin everything to her benefit, which, if you're going to be a politician and one of the biggest stages at all, you've got to be able to take every kind of setback, whether perceived or real, and spin it into a way that makes you look in the best possible light. We also get to see Jonah back over in present day with in Sherman Tanz's building. He basically interrupts the conversation with Furlong and says, you know what, I want to run again. And Sherman Tanz says, you know what, I love you, Jonah, because you do anything that I say, but I don't want to worry about people running in like the Senate or the House. He only cares about people running in the House. He only cares about president and senators. So kind of an allusion that's for something that's going to be coming up towards the end of the episode. And as we're talking about running for a possible Senate seat, we cut back to 16 years ago, and we get to see Selena when she's running for office. And man, there are some sweet hairstyles for Mike and Gary. Just especially Mike. He's got this weird kind of like kind of soul patchy kind of beard thing, and his hair's kind of stringy and long in the back. Such a great look. But this is kind of I feel like the first inkling that I can't quite tell if this is the first time, but it seems like it, that Selena realizes that Andrew is basically cheating on her a lot. And as she walks into her campaign bus, she sees that Andrew is messing around with one of the biggest donors for the campaign. And Mike has just told Selena that they've run out of money and they really need to get some TV time to be able to kind of push them over the hump so they can win the election. And, of course, Selena, using any opportunity to be able to kind of spin it in her favor, when Andrew comes up with some really BS story about why this donor was helping him in the van. It was like a pen had exploded in his pants, and she was helping him out. Selena realizes, oh wait, this is a great opportunity to get the money that I need to get that TV time, and basically just in her not so kind of subtle way, but basically just kind of blackmails her out to get the $250,000 necessary to really get that TV time. So we can see how Selena won the election there. We also see back to present day BKD Consulting, and we get to see Chung, who was running for president at the time, was really considering a run for that, is with BKD Consulting, which is basically Ben Kent and Danny's consulting firm, and he's trying to. Chung is looking for a change, and of course Danny has the idea like, why don't we just have you talk, do an interview with the gentleman that you saved, and you feel like you can kind of start to see where the seams start to fall apart on Chung's stories, because like Chung doesn't really want to get anybody that's kind of related to the story to be able to talk on camera. I feel like the story as Chung is kind of said and used to run is probably not the entire story. So the idea of actually talking to somebody that has seen it or experienced it would not really work out in Chung's favor. But Amy's there as well, and Kent, Ben, and Dan are really excited to have Amy on board as well. And Amy's excited to be there too, but before she can do anything, though, she has to tell Selena that she's going to be leaving. And so, of course, they already realize, like, well, that means you're out. You're not going to do it because Selena, you're never really going to tell Selena, and Selena's never really going to give you that option. She's got her hooks too deep into you. She's never going to let you go. So then we also see Selena at the groundbreaking ceremony. And we get of course, we get meet Quarty, who's one of the biggest donors there that she met when she was down in Alabama there. And so we see him there for the groundbreaking. And we also find out the Washington Post has got wind of the story. The president of Yale has come by and says, you know what? Washington Post knows about the story, so we'd like to kind of, postpone the groundbreaking to give us some time to think about this. And at that time, Catherine is also there for the groundbreaking. Her water breaks, so she goes into labor. And we do find out that the president basically tells Selena as she's leaving Harvard, says, hey, you know what, you don't take K Street because the KKK, the cool queers of color, they're having a pee-in front of the skull and full of skull of bones. So the idea of a pee-in, I have no idea how that all works out, but it sounds bizarre. But so they're the KKK, the cool queers of color, are having a pee-in at the Skull of Bones. So while Catherine goes into labor, we cut back to 24 years ago, and we get to see Selena giving birth to Catherine. And you can see Selena, just the whole idea of having a baby. Selena is not excited about this at all. Actually having the baby put in her arms, you can tell Selena was just somebody that was not really built for motherhood. Does not like the idea of this screaming, gross baby that's kind of leaking black stuff out of it in her arms. It was like, you know what, I really want to run for Congress. And she does ask the nurse that's there, it's like, hey, if we have any questions, could we get your number? If I give your number to Andrew. And I guess that is probably like the first time that we get to see like Andrew, whether Andrew's actually cheated on Selena before that, but this seems like the key moment where it does begin, this long chain of Andrew cheating on Selena with women that are nearby. Oh, there you go. So we also see, though, that this is the time we get to meet Gary. Gary was a nurse at the hospital where Selena was giving birth. So we get to see Gary, who's crushed the ice himself because he didn't feel like the hospital leaves the ice chips way too big. So he's crushed the ice chips himself personally. So I feel like that was the moment. I would love to see the moment that Gary went from nurse to actually working for Selena. What was that kind of moment that kind of brought the two together? Because you'd think like, I guess he hung around as a nurse kind of fluttering around for the few days while Selena was still in the hospital before she went home with Catherine. And maybe that's how they forged that connection. But very interesting to see like that's how Gary came into Selena's life. Again, rocking some sweet hair. So we also find out, though, that, of course, Selena does go to Catherine's hospital. And by the time she gets there, of course, Catherine's already had the baby. Andrew's there because at least one parent should have been there for this. So Catherine doesn't want to really hold the baby at all. Selena doesn't want to hold the baby, just wants to give it a little pat on the head. Pretty distant about this whole thing. And as they're leaving to walk out, though, Jafar shows up. And again, how classy is Jafar? Jafar comes off just like a rock star because he says, in my country, when somebody gives birth to a baby, it's customary to slaughter a goat. But I also know that you're vegans, so I decided to go with the wipe warmer instead. And this is the first time that you ever get to see Marjorie, like a genuine, like enthusiastic response from anything in Marjorie. She really drops the facade for a moment and gets so excited about having a wipe warmer. So it was nice to see what really gets Marjorie going. That's you talk about wipe warmers, and Marjorie just cannot get excited enough. So, of course, as Selena walks out of the hospital with Catherine, Marjorie, the baby, and they're debating on the name the whole time. Like, what are we going to call the name? Little Richard's kind of been joked about because, like, hey, we call him that way. If we call the baby Little Richard, that we could have fun with that. But no name has really been decided. So when they do get outside there, of course, the press is around there asking questions about a variety of different things. And Leon mentions the spa, of course. But Selena, seizing that moment, though, does grab the baby from Catherine, holds it, and basically says, hey, you know what? The baby's name is Little Richard. I've already decided that. That's what the name's going to be. And you can see, cutting over to Catherine, that she's like, wait, what? We've decided about this? This is what is going on? But Selena's in her moment. She's seizing any opportunity to basically spin everything. And we saw this earlier in the episode back when they were in Alabama, and where she took Gary's story and spun it for her own benefit. Selena is not above using anyone close to her to take aspects of their lives and spin it around in her favor. And she is shameless. We see her have zero remorse about doing that to anybody that's close to her. It's interesting. I'd be curious to see if it really came down to it. Choose between Gary or Catherine, which one she feels like is more important in Selena's life. I feel like it's Gary because he is with her so often and is so intimately involved in all of her life, while Catherine, I feel like, is a photo op at best at times. So, but still, she, regardless, she had no remorse for Gary, so she certainly has no remorse about using Catherine and her new baby to be able to kind of spin everything in her favor. So grabs the baby, calls him Little Richard, announces that's the name to the press, and says that, you know what, this baby, of course, is half African-American, and I am ashamed of what's transpired at Yale. I would not want my library built on the grounds that were used by former slaves at Yale. So uses that for her opportunity as well. And then when Leon, of course, is there and asks about her time and the Arizona Wellness Clinic, she again, without mentioning her time there, acknowledging that at all, but does say that both Catherine and her mother had problems with mental illness in the family. And Catherine is kind of taken aback by this. But I do like Richard always chiming in, saying, oh, yeah, kind of runs in my family, too. But basically just says, hey, we can't stop fighting this. And at no time, comes away smelling like a rose. Does not admit to her time in the wellness clinic at all. Has basically kind of, circumvented the Yale situation and looks like a hero. But we find out, though, that, of course, after the fact, Yale, when Selena's basically shamed them for thinking about building that presidential library on that ground used by that housed former slaves, that Yale's pulled out of it. They're not going to do the presidential library there anymore. And so Amy's like, I'm so sorry you lost the library at Yale. And Selena, we figure she's been one step ahead of everything this whole time. She's the one that leaked all this information to Leon about Yale and also about the wellness clinic as well. So the reason for that, though, is that the reason she's doing this is she doesn't want to be tied to a presidential library. Because why do you want to worry about a presidential library if you're going to be running for president? That's something that former presidents do. And Selena is not, in her mind, she has no intention of just being a former president. She's going to make the big run and she's going to try again. So as they walk into her office, we see Ben, we see Kent, we see Dan. We basically see the whole team reunited. And Selena's going to make the run for it. Basically because of Tibet and the exposure that's given Selena, she's basically, as she says, she's going to ride that ticket home and get back into the White House. And Montez's numbers are dropping, so I figure like this is a great opportunity to do it again. So yeah, and I like that Kent makes her like, well, this is like your fourth time trying it. So hopefully they can get it right. But of course, there's going to be a little restructuring as well too. Things aren't going to be the same they were in terms of who's going to be on the staff. Of course, Mike's there. Oh, he's like, who invited Mike? We feel like, Mike is maybe not long for this this campaign, especially if Selena's going to be running again and wanting to take it serious this time. But Ben does take Selena aside and says, before we can fully commit to this, there's one thing you still have to do. And Selena does not want to do this. And we cut to Jafar's hotel, and Selena's just been with Jafar. They've been intimate there. And, Jafar's already talking about like, hey, we got to go to China. We've got a deal that's going to be happening. We can be part of this. And Selena has to break up with Jafar. And you can see how hard this is for Selena, because honestly, she would love to, as she says, she knows how good he is, but the baggage that he carries, as he says, the Muslim baggage, for somebody that's trying to run to be president would just be too much of a distraction from her opportunity and her chance to become president. So as much as she does care about Jafar, and we see that as she's leaving the hotel, just the tear, she's trying to keep back the tears. Not very happy about this. You can see it really affecting Selena, that she's had to let go of this guy that she is incredibly fond of, because as much as Selena cares about him, at the end of the day, she cares about being president more than any other relationship in her life. This position, this I don't say like power, but just the person to be a woman running being the president is just a goal that Selena's had, and she will not let anything or anyone ultimately stop her from doing this, even if she's got to hurt herself and somebody that she really cares about in the process. So we see, of course, at the beginning of the season, it was kind of teased about heading over to Cedar Bluffs, Iowa. That's basically, if you're going to be running for office, that's where you need to go to kind of announce, at least subtly, that that's anybody that's there that's talking has basically acknowledged to everybody else in the room that, yes, I'm seriously going to be running for president. So Selena goes in to give her speech, and we find out the person that gives her speech is Leon. So he has left the Washington Post and is now working for Selena. And so the question is, like, what's happened to Mike? So we do find out, though, that Mike is now teaching, and basically I feel like he's teaching social studies or government policies at some night school, it appears to be, and not doing very well, because his as the students are leaving when class is over, he says, if you really want to see how the presidency works, I got a great movie for you to watch. Watch Air Force One, because that's when you see what a president can really do. So already you can see Mike not doing well at this job either, and it's a shame. It'll be curious to see what happens to Mike in the coming season, because he's such a source of comedy. He's got to find some way to get back into the orbit. So before we cut to that, though, there's one last thing that happens over at Cedar Bluffs. Is everybody goes in except for Amy and Dan, and Amy asks to speak with Dan for a second and says, "Hey, remember when we were talking after everything that happened with Selena and Dan, with Kent and Ben, and we were really drunk, and Dan remembers that, and they ended up sleeping together that night, and found out that Amy's pregnant, and it's Dan's child." So Dan, as much as he felt like everything was kind of turning around and maybe going his way, is now realizing that, oh man, I am now the father to a child that I really didn't want, but now I'm stuck in it. So we end the episode there with Selena announcing to everybody there over at Cedar Bluffs that she's going on a feeling tour of America. She's going to go around to all these various things, all these various cities all around there, and basically take in the American experience, talk to the people, the real people, and feel what America's all about. And she, of course, spinning, she hated being in the South Bronx, thought this was a terrible place to have her office, and even uses that to spin it for a positive, because I could have chosen to have my office anywhere, but I did it in the South Bronx because I wanted to be with the real people, to see what it's like to see and smell and feel what it feels like to be a real American. So, of course, Selena, an expert spinner, taking everything she can to make things go her way. But she's not the only one that's going to be running for president. So I guess this will be interesting to see what happens next season, is that we see over at Franklin Pierce High School, Jonah decides, like, you know what, I'm going to be running for president. And Sherman Tanz is there. So alluding to what they said at the beginning of the episode, Sherman Tanz is only interested in buying presidents and senators, because, that's the only place where you can really get something to happen. And we do find out that Jonah's campaign is like, you know what, they hate me, so what better, why not vote for me and take somebody that they hate and throw them right back in their face. So he is going to be running for president, which should pose for an interesting next season. So what does that mean for next season? You know, it was certainly this season was great because it was a change, as Dave Mandel said. Like the idea of continuing to write for a real for somebody that was a president was going to be too challenging because I mean, the way this is a very dysfunctional group of people, and so to have them be a real leader of the free world, you know, there's a certain level of competency. Well, you know, given certain, excluding president situations here, but a certain level of competency that you want out of a president. So it's tougher to write the kind of stories I think that they wanted to do with Veep under given those conditions. So the idea of like, well, why don't we have her be a former president and kind of really explore some of kind of unmined material? How does a president spend their time after they've left the White House? What is post-presidency like for that person? And I feel like there's maybe a little bit more to mine. I'm curious to see what they think, because there could have been more material to mine. But basically, they decided, you know what, I think this might be interesting to see another running for president again. So we've kind of reset back to where we were a few seasons ago, where Selena's going to make a run. Of course, she's not vice president now. She's a former president making another run again for the White House. I will be curious to see what they want. Whether maybe next season is the last season, so Selena does officially get elected president, and that's how you end the series. That could be a possibility. The idea of Jonah and Selena running in opposition to each other could be interesting. To see a debate between Selena and Jonah could be interesting. I can't imagine Jonah going very far in this election, but given our current political climate, you know, who knows how far Jonah could go in this. And I feel like if they really want to mine this next season, then they've got to be able to have Jonah go the distance for this, because that's when you're going to get the best material of Jonah be able to kind of stick along with Selena that entire time and really be a thorn in Selena's side as she's trying to reclaim the White House. So who knows? I mean, they were certainly renewed for next season. I can't imagine the show going another season past that, because if Selena, the two options are Selena wins the election and is president, or Selena loses and she's back where she is now, a former president. So we've already seen what they've done this season. I don't know if the season they'd want to go back to a possible season 8 and have her just be another former president. I feel like, you know, they've already covered that ground this season. Do they want to go revisit that again? So the other option, she wins the presidency, and I feel like that's they've already shied away from having her be president for real for any length of time, just because of those issues before. So I don't know if they'd really want to do that. So I kind of feel like next season it could be setting up to be the final season of that. Selena at the end does win the White House, and that's how we end. But I feel like, as always, anytime at the end of every episode, every season, there's always a bitterness to it. So I mean, certainly last season was probably the most bitter pill for Selena to swallow. This ends on a little more of a positive note, with the idea that she's running again for president, with the bitterness of having to let go of Jafar to do so. So I will be curious to see what happens next season. We get a campaign coming again. It should be interesting. And it's definitely going to be interesting to see how Leon fits in the mix as opposed to Mike. I feel it's going to be a much more, a better level of competency. But I feel like, you know, Leon's not perfect as well. I mean, he's certainly more competent than Mike, but I'm sure we're going to see some of where Leon's weak spots are. And because nobody can, other than Richard, nobody basically can skate through there without getting chewed out by anybody in Selena's whole core campaign unit there. They all attack each other as much as they attack the opposition as well. So, and we'll find out how Mike kind of fits back into the picture as well. I feel like you can't have Mike on the outskirts for too long. He brings too much comedy to the show. Matt Walsh is such a great player for the show. So we'll figure out how he gets in there next season. Be interesting to see how they bring all these pieces together. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Veep After Show, folks. We've broken down whole season 6. We'll be back again for season 7 next spring. Be curious to see where that's at. I have a feeling, keep your fingers on my prediction, it's going to be the final season. I'm going to call that now. We'll see if I'm right or not. But, folks, thanks for joining us this entire season. I wish April, Nadine, and Mina were here to break this down with me, but it was just me. You had me tonight doing this all by myself. I hope you enjoyed the experience. Hope you enjoyed the series. And we'll see you back here next season. But in the meantime, folks, you can like us on Facebook. Give us those 5 stars on iTunes. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And thanks, everybody, for hopping in the chat, sharing your thoughts about the series. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HappyGoJackie. Until next season, folks, I'm Frank Moran, and we'll see you next time with the Veep After Show right here on AfterBuzz TV.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.